That completes the urgent question. We now come to the statement. Minister Kevin Hollinrake.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And with permission, I shall make a statement about post office legislation and Horizon redress schemes. I'm very pleased to be able to announce that we are introducing today a new bill that will quash the convictions of postmasters in England and Wales affected by the Horizon scandal. As set out in my written statement last month, this legislation will quash all convictions which meet a clear set of conditions. Those in scope will have their convictions quashed on the day that the new legislation is brought into force. Subject to parliamentary passage, our aim is for royal assent to happen as soon as possible before the summer recess. We accept and have always been clear that the legislation may overturn the convictions of some people who are guilty of genuine wrongdoing. However, we believe this is a price worth paying to ensure that many innocent people are exonerated. The Government will, however, seek to mitigate the risk of people receiving financial redress when they have not been wronged. The Government also accepts that this legislation is unprecedented. It is an exceptional response to a factually exceptional situation. I want to be clear, however, that this does not set a precedent, nor is it a criticism of the judiciary or the courts who have dealt swiftly with matters brought before them. The fact remains, however, that 3 years after the first convictions were overturned, only around 100 have yet been quashed, and that without government intervention, many of these convictions could not be overturned, either because all the evidence has long been lost, or because, quite simply, postmasters have lost faith in the state and the criminal justice system and would not come forward to seek justice. The legislation will apply to England and Wales only. However, we are fully committed to work with the Scottish Government and the Northern Ireland Executive through regular weekly official level engagement to progress their own approaches. I have met with my counterparts in the Scottish Government and the Northern Ireland Executive to offer support and address their concerns, and offer further meetings. The financial redress scheme, of course, will be open to applications from applicants throughout the UK once convictions have been overturned. Can I thank the Business and Trade Committee, which recently published a report including some recommendations for government regarding Horizon redress. We will, of course, respond to them in the usual way, but today I'd like to address two of the recommendations which they make. The first is that responsibility for redress should not lie with the Post Office, that it should be subject to independent oversight. This has also been something recommended to us by the Horizon Compensation Advisory Board. I can announce today that it will be the Department for Business and Trade, rather than the Post Office, which will be responsible for delivery of this redress, which is relating to the overturning of these convictions. Final decisions on redress will be made by independent panels or independent individuals. I shall return to the House at a later date, with your permission, Mr Speaker, to provide details on how we intend to deliver redress for those who have had their convictions overturned by this bill or via subsequent measures taken in Scotland and Northern Ireland. We are discussing these details with the Advisory Board. My honourable friend, the Financial Secretary to the Treasury, will be introducing legislation to make any payments made via this new scheme that are exempt from tax. The Select Committee also recommended that the Government should introduce legally binding timeframes to deliver redress for sub-postmasters with financial penalties for non-compliance. And I strongly support the Committee's desire to speed up redress. We feel their proposed regime would have the opposite impact. It would mean potentially imposing penalties on forensic accountants or others who are helping postmasters to prepare their claims. Doing that would probably cause some of them to withdraw from this work, which would slow down the delivery of redress. Furthermore, we do not want to be in a position where we are rushing postmasters into major decisions about their claims and the offers they receive, possibly meaning some are timed out of redress altogether. The Advisory Board have said that their strong view is that this would be a backward step. which is why less than 2 months ago we passed legislation removing the arbitrary deadline from the GLO scheme. We do not want to reverse that change. However, the Government is acting to ensure that redress is delivered as quickly as possible. First, we are working with claimants' lawyers to reduce the number of cases which require expert evidence, for example, forensic accountants or medical evidence, which does delay claims. We will pilot this approach, and assuming that the pilots succeed, we hope to expand it rapidly. Second, the Advisory Board and I have asked for monthly reports on each scheme. These will come from independent case managers for schemes where they are in place. We will publish those reports, which will give us the best basis on which to assess measures for speeding up redress. Finally, we are introducing optional fixed sum awards. In January, the Government announced it would introduce an offer of an optional £75,000 fixed sum award for those in the Group Litigation Order scheme. As of the 5th of March, 110 offers have been accepted, and over 100 of these have taken the £75,000 fixed payment. Of those who have accepted the fixed payment, 3/4 are new claims. So the fixed offer has already meant that over 100 claims have been resolved very promptly. In some cases, those people will have got more than they would have asked for. The fixed offer also has had a helpful effect on other claims. It substantially reduces work on small claims by claimants' lawyers, making more resource available to progress larger claims more quickly. I'm pleased to announce today that the £75,000 fixed sum award offer will also now be extended to the Horizon Shortfall scheme to ensure that everyone across all the schemes is treated fairly. Those who have already settled their claim below £75,000 will be offered a top-up to bring their total redress to this amount. This means over 2,000 postmasters will benefit quickly from this announcement. We are mindful that claims in the GLO scheme are not being submitted as swiftly as we would like to see. To ensure that we get help to claimants more quickly, we've already announced an optional fixed sum award of £75,000. I can announce today that anyone who chooses not to take that offer but instead submits a full claim for individual assessment will straight away have their interim payment topped up to £50,000. Mr. Speaker, many postmasters' lives have been ruined by this scandal. We are working hard to deliver redress. We have set up the Williams inquiry, which will discover the truth. We will provide fair financial redress as promptly as we can, and we will exonerate those who were so unjustly convicted of crimes which they did not commit. Mr. Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Rushanara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for advance sight of his statement. Before I begin my response, I'd like to put on the record my deep disappointment at the Minister's comment this morning on BBC Breakfast. Instead of categorically condemning the Tory party donor Frank Hester's horrific racist remarks about the Right Honourable Member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington, and despite Number 10, after much delay, finally describing the remarks as, I quote, racist and wrong, the Minister this morning appeared to contradict this position.
Point 4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a statement on post office legislation, and may I respectfully say that what the honourable lady opposite is saying is irrelevant to this statement.
The Shadow Minister, we're moving on. Minister.
I will move on. I will move on. I simply hope that the Minister will reflect on the reversal of the statement this morning and the position that he took, that he would take a donation if it was provided by the donor. I hope he reflects on the impact that it is having on many of us. Turning to, Mr. Speaker, today's crucial statement, the Horizon scandal is truly shocking, a miscarriage of justice and one of the most devastating in British history. The scandal has brought devastation to the lives of hundreds of falsely convicted sub-postmasters. Over 20 years on, They and their families are still suffering from the consequences and the trauma of all they have been put through. I pay tribute to their determination in pursuing justice, and I want to pay tribute to Alan Bates and the sub-postmasters who have pioneered this campaign and worked tirelessly to seek justice. Without their bravery and perseverance, the campaign would not have be where it is today. I also want to pay tribute to my right honourable friend, the member for North Durham, for all his work and the campaigning on this issue by Lord Arbuthnot for many years, as well as others in this House and the other House, and members of the Business Select Committee and the Chair. Turning to the legislation, we of course welcome the laying of this legislation today. But before giving a full verdict on the legislation, we will need to properly scrutinise the details and analyse its potential impacts. In the first instance, Mr. Speaker, this legislation does, in our view, leave a series of outstanding issues and questions as to when justice and compensation will be delivered and to whom. First, I'd like to address the territorial scope of the legislation, as it is currently only applying to England and Wales, even though the Post Office is not devolved and the Horizon scandal is a UK-wide Horizon system, and the scandal, in terms of its impacts, is UK-wide. We know there are approximately 30 cases that need overturning between Scotland and Northern Ireland, but there remains a series of outstanding questions as to when sub-postmasters in both Scotland and particularly Northern Ireland will receive justice and compensation. I welcome the Minister's offer of and assurances of having regular dialogue with the devolved administrations, but I'd be grateful if he could provide more detail on how that will work in practice, recognising the different legal processes. Mr. Speaker, additionally, as we know, 80% of the redress budget is yet to be paid out. There remains considerable uncertainty as to when sub-postmasters will receive their compensation. I'm sure we can all agree that the sub-postmasters have waited long enough. The delays are causing further financial distress and further suffering. We note the Business and Trade Select Committee's recommendation of a legally binding timeframe from when an offer is first tabled to when settlement is reached. Even if these legally binding targets are not adopted, what assurances can the Minister give that he will meet his target of ensuring all compensation is paid out, is out of the door by the end of the year? What mechanisms will the Minister put in place to ensure that there are no further delays? And I know that he is committed to making sure there are no further delays, but sub-postmasters will want to know that that actually happens. And given the recent chaos in the Post Office's leadership, we welcome the decision to take the Post Office out of the redress process. As the Minister said, redress must have independent oversight. We know the Post Office is in disarray, and what we need is focus and efficiency in ensuring compensation is paid to the sub-postmasters as soon as possible. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the suffering of the sub-postmasters can never come close to being repaid just through financial redress, though it is so important we get this right. The very least the government can do is ensure they receive the fair compensation and exoneration as soon as possible. There are those who've been impacted by the scandal that have sadly passed away, never to be able to see their innocence proven or live to see the compensation they deserve. It is absolutely vital that the government acts with the urgency and speed that's needed to correct this terrible injustice.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I can, seeing as the comments the Shadow Minister made are on the record, if I can just deal with them very briefly, Mr. Speaker. And I've got to say, it's the second time I think she's made comments at this dispatch box that have been unfair or factually incorrect. And I hope she doesn't come and correct the record, because if she actually watched the interview I made, I absolutely did condemn the words of Mr. Hester. I said they were wrong, I said they were racist, and I think it's absolutely right he's apologised. And she should actually watch the full broadcast, and I hope comes back to this House and apologises and corrects the record. In terms of the points she raises, I think they largely pertain to the Scottish and Northern Ireland devolved administrations. I quite understand the concern around that, and I'm very keen to make sure we get this right across the United Kingdom. I think, as she says in her own comments, they have different legal processes, she acknowledges, in those areas. Therefore, we think it would be inappropriate for us to legislate for parts of the United Kingdom that have different legal processes, different prosecutors. Justice itself is devolved, although the Post Office, as she rightly says, is a national organisation, UK-wide organisation. That's why we think the legislation should be allow those devolved administrations to legislate themselves if that's what they choose to do, and we'll work very closely with them on a weekly basis. Officials are meeting on a weekly basis to assist wherever we can to make sure this is delivered, the compensation can be delivered UK-wide, as is how the scheme operates. I think she said, and I may be wrong here, so I will check the record myself, that I think she says 80% of compensation is yet to be delivered. Can I just say, across the whole, all the schemes, around 2/3 of cases have already received full and final compensation, although in that being the case, some people will be topped up, about 2,000 people will be topped up by the announcement I made earlier, the £75,000. So it's not right to say that the majority of people are waiting for compensation, as I think she said. In terms of do we want to deliver by the end of the year, absolutely we do. I'll just point out to her, as I said in my remarks, not everything is within our gift. We can't compel a claimant to submit a claim or when that will happen. So if somebody put in a claim right towards the end of the year, for example, it may not be possible to do that for the end of the year. So not everything is within our gift. Anything that is, we're very keen to expedite. In terms of independent oversight, absolutely critical that we have that. In the overturned conviction schemes, all schemes have independent oversight. In the overturned conviction schemes, we have retired High Court Judge Sir Gary Hickinbottom, and on that scheme particularly, we have the £600,000 fixed sum award, but also on Mr Hickinbottom's advice, we've introduced the £450,000 payment as soon as a full claim has been submitted. So we're doing everything we can to make sure people are compensated as quickly as possible.
Paul Scully.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I welcome the Minister's statement, the pragmatic way that he has looked to speed up the claims and take it in-house as best he can, the legislation that's proposed, and indeed the extension of the £75,000 to historic shortfall scheme people. I would point the Minister to an article in the Times this morning talking about people who may be excluded reportedly excluded from the legislation, and ask him if he can give any assurances that people who have gone through this process, whose original conviction was based substantially on the Horizon problems, will indeed be exonerated and therefore able to get compensation.
Okay, I thank him for his question and for his tireless campaigning on this area and his tireless work as my predecessor in this particular role. He did some great work in getting us where we are today, helping to get to where we are today. Yes, he's right to say there are some people that are not exonerated through this process. For example, people who have been before the Court of Appeal. But those people will still be able to appeal again in the light of our legislation today. Of course, they had that right anyway to do that. We will support them where we can to bring forward their cases to the Court of Appeal, and we very much hope people who are innocent who follow that process are exonerated.
We come to SNP spokesperson Marion Fellows.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and apologies for being slightly late. I welcome thank you to the Minister for prior sight of his statement. I welcome the announcement of the legislation. It will hopefully go a long way in speeding up full and fair financial redress for a large number of Horizon victims and bring them closer to justice. Furthermore, I welcome the enhanced financial redress for those who have experienced Horizon-related shortfalls and those who have already settled for less than £75,000, and that they'll have their redress topped up. I want to pay tribute to the Minister for his hard work on this, and also the sterling work of the Horizon Compensation Advisory Board and the ongoing work of Sir Wyn Williams and his inquiry. Most of all, I want to pay tribute to the victims following the unimaginable pain they've been forced to endure at the hands of Post Office Limited and successive UK governments, and I hope today's announcement can give them some hope there is an end in sight to this sorry chapter. I welcome the administration of financial redress schemes have been taken out the hands of Post Office Limited, not before time. Post Office Limited have demonstrated obfuscation and incompetence at every stage. From a Scottish perspective, I'm sure my Northern Irish colleagues will agree with me. I'm disappointed deeply that the legislation is confined to England and Wales only. This needs to be addressed to include both Scotland and Northern Ireland to ensure parity. Westminster Parliament is sovereign. Scottish Government Parliament can be challenged on its legislation, and this needs to be looked at. The devolution process also risks slowing things down. Will he and the Government guarantee today that any relevant orders under Section 104 of the Scotland Act are processed quickly by his Government? Scotland has no direct devolved equivalent on postal affairs. Only Westminster has remit for the Post Office and his department. Will the Minister ensure the bill contains provisions requiring Post Office Limited to fully cooperate with the Scottish Government and supply all needed materials? It's vitally important that victims in Scotland and Northern Ireland do not have to wait any longer for justice than their English and Welsh counterparts. Victims across these isles suffered enormously at the hands of a wholly reserved institution, and it is essential there is complete parity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank her again for all the work she does in this area? She's been a tireless campaigner herself, and again, one of the reasons we are this far on. We'd all like to be further on, but really important part of the work that's gone on she's contributed to. And she's right to say victims should be front and centre in terms of how we deliver compensation, that we deliver it fairly, and we deliver it as quickly as possible. Some of the changes I announced today, that included in my remarks, were brought forward on the basis of feedback we've had from victims and the legal representatives. So absolutely we do listen to them, make sure we deliver any changes where we can. I fully understand her points on Scotland and Northern Ireland. She can understand, I think, the constitutional sensitivity around this area. These are tough decisions to make. And I quite understand that Scottish ministers will also have to make similar decisions. They can make a decision to do what we are doing, of course, and if they do that, we'll support them in terms of the way they legislate. But given the sensitivities around this, we thought the best way that devolved administrations, where justice is devolved, they should make those decisions rather than us. But my commitment again to make sure we work across the piece wherever we can to deliver that consistency of compensation that she requires, and not forgetting that the redress schemes are UK-wide. So as soon as people's convictions are overturned, they can access compensation just like they can in England and Wales.
Sir Robert Neill. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I think everyone wants to see the suffering of the postmasters brought to an end as swiftly as possible. And I welcome what the Minister says in particular about simplifying and speeding up the compensation scheme. He will know that claimant lawyers such as Neill, who gave evidence to the Business and Trade Select Committee, have real expertise in this field, and I hope that he will work very closely with the sector to maximise that expertise in designing the scheme. But can I just say one note of caution? I know the Minister says that this is exceptional. It is constitutionally unprecedented to overturn convictions imposed by our courts in good faith on the evidence before them at the time by legislation. It is most undesirable, frankly, that we should ever go down that route. And at risk of sounding a note of caution, some of us will need to see the detail of the legislation, and we'll want to see what evidence the government have that it will be quicker and more comprehensive to quash convictions by this constitutionally unprecedented route, rather than leaving it to the courts with assistance to deal with it, which could have been dealt with, as he knows, by a presumption in favour of their being quashed if they depend upon horizon evidence, rather than this wholesale thing. And in particular, will he look at what impact this will have in relation to rehabilitation of offenders legislation, and also the impact as to whether or not convictions quashed by this legislation will be removed effectively, for example, if you travel to the United States or other foreign jurisdictions where you may need a visa and you'll need to be able to show that you do not have an outstanding conviction.
Minister.
Well, can I thank him for his question and all his work on this himself, and it's been very important that we've engaged with him through the process, and clearly he has much expertise in this area. We agree with him that this is unprecedented. We agree with him that it's undesirable, but we believe it's the least worst option. If you look at the current progress in terms of, and we want to see this delivered more quickly, of the 790 or so postmasters we believe this legislation will affect, only around 100 so far the convictions have been overturned. We think that's an untenable situation, which is why we decided to take this route. But of course I'll continue to work with him and continue to listen to his very wise advice. In terms of how the process for marking the record, so I can write in saying if where the Court of Appeal overturns a conviction, the record is marked overturned by the Court of Appeal. We see these records as being marked in a similar way, quashed by Parliament or something along those lines. So, but again, very happy to engage with them to make sure we get that right.
Liam Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the Minister's statement, and can I thank him for the collegiate way in which he is working across the House to try and bring justice for those who have suffered. This is a welcome step forward today. As he knows, and I'm glad to see him take on board some of the recommendations we made in our report last week that set out how we deliver fair, fast and independent redress. The government has today proposed how it's going to overturn convictions. It has taken the Post Office out of some, but not all, processing of claims, and it has crucially increased the number of people who can apply for fixed-term remuneration. However, the Post Office is still handling the claims for at least, I think, 100 of those with overturned convictions when it is patently not fit for purpose. For those who seek to contest their claims, the Minister is saying there won't be a legally binding time frame between when they submit that claim and when the initial offer is made by his department. That's a problem. And there's no standard tariff proposed for compensation for key heads of terms, like, for example, loss of reputation. That too is a problem. So this bill today is far more than a half measure, that's true, but it's not yet the full solution. And I just want to leave him with the words of Jo Hamilton, who messaged me last night to highlight the plight of the GLO litigants in particular, and the way in which they, in her words, have to justify every last penny, even if some of their claim is for actual monies stolen from them by the Post Office. Why can't the government do the right thing before even more victims die? Those words need to be ringing in our ears as we seek to perfect this bill.
Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank him for his comments and his collaboration on this. Really important that we listen to his recommendation and indeed some of his very informative sessions they've had with the Select Committee, which was important. I sat through all 5 hours of those sessions. It was, so yes, at this point in time, we believe the Post Office should continue with its existing work on the cases it's got in front of it, around 100. We have no capacity at the moment within the Department of Business and Trade to handle those claims right now. Clearly we will have by the time this legislation comes into effect. We don't want to pause between the legislation coming into effect in July and compensation payments being made. We think we can get those payments to people in August using that route. Now there may be some people left in the overturned convictions, the first tranche, the people who have been through the appeal court at that point in time, and we will certainly look at his recommendations in terms of whether we bring those back in-house or leave those with the Post Office, but that's something we will keep an open mind on. In terms of what I think you might describe as fixed timescales to respond to offers or service level agreements, we've got those already for the GLO scheme, that on a submission of a full claim, we commit to responding to 90% of those claims within 40 days. Very happy to look at how we might put some benchmarks in place for this new scheme to make sure there's a similar speed of response. In terms of standard tariffs, he makes that recommendation. He probably listened, I'm sure you heard what I said earlier in terms of some of the new pilots we're doing around working with some of the lawyers involved here, where they can submit claims without the forensic accountants, without the medical reports, which may do something along the lines he says. So I'll happily have an ongoing conversation with him. On the GLO scheme, bear in mind that I think thus far 128 claims have been submitted. I think of the 490 that there are, 110 of those have been settled, and there's only one so far to my knowledge that has gone yet to the independent, in terms of the arbitration dispute resolution before it goes to the independent panel. So I think it indicates to everybody in the House, hopefully, that generally offers have been made that are fair and they've been accepted almost straight away. So I understand what Jo Hamilton says, and I've met with Jo about some of the processes she had to go through to prove her claim. We're determined to reduce those kind of frictions and reduce that evidence requirement on things that are not essentially material. We've got three things we've got to get right when we're delivering compensation. We've got to be fair to the individual, of course, and their families that have been affected. We've got to be fair to all the other postmasters as well to make sure there's a consistency across the scheme. And, of course, we've got to be fair to the taxpayer. But there is no cap on what we're going to pay people as long as it is fair.
Duncan Baker.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank the Minister for bringing this to the House today. It's clearly moves in the right direction for closure. Many times I have talked in this House about similar issues. £1 billion has been put on the side by the government to deal with all this issue. And that is despite the fact that the Post Office have taken millions upon millions upon millions of postmasters, innocent people. We have never had the figure of what was taken. And I've asked for that before. But secondly, I want a second figure. Fujitsu have said on the record that they would help compensate victims as well, add to the remuneration pot. What progress have we made, Minister, on making them pay also for being culpable in this whole fiasco?
Well, thank you for his regular comments and contributions in this particular area. It's always good to have the views of the only former serving postmaster in this House. Yeah, we are looking at that figure, trying to identify what it is, and we will hopefully come back to him at some point. And it's quite complicated. A lot of these records go back a long, long way. But that's a body of work we're undertaking with the Post Office. In terms of Fujitsu, the Secretary of State had a conversation yesterday, I think, with the Chief Executive, the Global Chief Executive of Fujitsu. So we are keen to make sure that Fujitsu contribute, and they've already said they will. They said they are a moral responsibility to contribute. I think it's fair to say at this point in time, he mentions £1 billion, but we don't know the final figure in terms of compensation, but we'd expect a significant element of that to come from Fujitsu.
Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I also thank the Minister for advance sight, not just of his statement, but also somewhat novelly, the government top lines to take. That latter document includes this passage. So far, we have identified up to around 800 cases that are potentially in scope. Note, if we use this number in public, we're going to get held to it. There is a risk that we may deliver fewer overturns or award redress to fewer individuals. We will then have to explain that. If it is the view of officials in the Minister's department that accountability and transparency are some sort of problem, then does he really think that they are the people who are best placed to exercise oversight of the compensation scheme? And should that not be put now in the hands of someone who is independent of both government and the Post Office?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's interesting the figure he uses and the documentary references. I wasn't aware that he had that. I haven't actually, interestingly, me. I haven't actually read that line actually, but it's because there might be an indication of that in my former comments, because I mentioned that exact figure earlier in my comments. I'm not afraid to be transparent or accountable for any of the delivery of these compensation schemes.
Chislehurst.
May I congratulate my honourable friend for all that he is doing, working night and day to bring this painful issue to a conclusion for the many postmasters and their families who have suffered so much over so many years. Can I just seek the assurance from the Minister that for those people who do not accept the fixed offer but wish to pursue an individual claim, that there will be expeditious treatment of those claims, that resources will be made available to deal with those claims quickly and efficiently, And also, can I ask the Minister to give an assurance that the claimant will have a named individual who is responsible for their files, rather than whoever happens to pick up the file on a specific day?
Well, can I thank him for his question? And yes, absolutely, I can give him that assurance. Fixed sum award is only one route. It's not right for everybody. Some people have higher levels of claims, and we will support them where we can. In my remarks, I announced some new measures we're doing that. We're using to do that, including a pilot scheme where it doesn't require expert reports, which should significantly abbreviate the timescale for responding to offers, be able to submit a claim and responding to the claim. In terms of expedition in this area, in the GLO scheme, for example, we set a target that 90% of cases would respond to a final claim within 40 days. We're hitting 87% currently against that measure, so we are delivering this more quickly. It makes an interesting point about a named claims manager or something along those lines. If I can, I'll take that away.
Clive Efford.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the statement. I welcome the legislation and removing the Post Office from the process as far as we have so far. But I don't think the Post Office is credible to be able to deal with any claims. I wrote to the Minister on the 12th of February regarding my constituent that came forward after the TV programme, and she was in a situation where she had problems with Horizon. She agreed a compensation with the Post Office way below what her losses were. She signed a non-disclosure agreement, but at that time she was dealing with a partner who was terminally ill, who has subsequently passed away. So she was in no fit state to be able to take on the Post Office, and it was seriously out of pocket. Now, in those circumstances, I would expect her to be able to come under the HSS scheme, and I hope that he will confirm that in the letter that no doubt he's going to send to me.
Well, I look forward to it. I haven't seen that letter yet. I understand his points about the Post Office handling claims. But I'm responding to every single letter I get on this from colleagues personally. And as we always do, but even more so on this particular occasion. So I'm very sorry to hear about his constituents and the situation they're in. If his constituents has accepted less than £75,000, they'll get an automatic uplift to £75,000. So if they receive less. But we're determined to make sure people across every single scheme are treated fairly and feel that they're being treated fairly. Very keen to look at his letter and make sure that is the case in his case.
Crosby.
Madam Deputy Speaker, may I welcome this important new bill. I know the Minister and his team have worked exceptionally hard on it to make it happen. Will the Minister join me in thanking Mr James Evans from Llanfair PG, who worked as a sub-postmaster in Llanfair Pwll for 47 years, with Post Office service record of 60 years, who is bringing together sub-postmasters and those on Honestmorn affected by this gross miscarriage of justice to ensure that they receive the correct support, compensation and, importantly, exoneration.
Well, I can thank her for her work on this, and yes, absolutely, I'd like to thank Mr Evans. The reason we are here now is because the victims of this scandal supported each other, led by Mr Bates, of course, Alan Bates, of course. So I welcome Mr Evans' work. If I can help all in terms of assist Mr Evans or the group he's got to make sure they do get compensated fairly, whatever their circumstance within these schemes, I'm very happy to do that.
Jonathan Edwards.
Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituent, Mr Enion, ran the Post Office in Llandovery in Carmarthenshire between 2000 and 2018. And he recently did an interview with the BBC and he estimated he'd lost around 75,000. And in addition, his health has deteriorated quite severely. Now, in that interview, he said he had no faith in the Horizon Shortfall Scheme and making an application. One, because he hasn't kept any records, but secondly, because he just doesn't think he's well enough to take on the Post Office for a second time. So what can the Minister do? I know he's working extremely hard and I pay tribute to him for the work that he's done, but what more can the Minister do to encourage people like Mr Enion to make an application for, through the scheme?
Okay, I thank you for his kind words and for representing his constituents so effectively. What we've announced today hopefully will be absolutely the right route for his constituents. It means he would not have to go through the what can be a complex process of submitting a detailed claim, he can simply opt for the £75,000 fixed sum award and walk away. There is no claim form to be filled in. A simple letter needs to be signed. That's it. But if he does feel that he should be compensated for more than that, he can go through the Horizon Shortfall Scheme itself. It does take a little bit longer, but still will end up with compensation both for his financial impact and his health impact. So very happy to help wherever I can with his case.
Sammy Wilson.
Madam Speaker. Can I first of all welcome the statement which the Minister has made today, and he has made promises to this House that he would bring forward legislation quickly, and he has done that. However, I must express the disappointment of all of the representatives from Northern Ireland that Northern Ireland is not included in this bill. The reasons the Minister has given just don't stand up. He has argued this is a sensitive constitutional issue. It is not. The First Minister, the Deputy First Minister, the Justice Minister have all made it clear that they would be quite happy for Northern Ireland to be included in this legislation. He's argued that the systems are different. There have been many occasions when Northern Ireland has been included in legislation here, even though the judicial system is different. This is about exonerating people, not about interfering with how the system works. And the last thing he has said is it might slow it down. Well, since this legislation is going to go through the House in the normal process, there is absolutely no reason why, as in past occasions, the Minister could not include a Northern Ireland section in this bill at the stage when it goes through the House. And all I would say to him today is look again at the arguments he has made. I don't think they stand up. I think that there is a way forward to make sure that those who have been affected in Northern Ireland are treated in the same way and in the same timing as those in the rest in England and Wales.
Well done,
well, can I thank him again for all the contributions he makes in the representation for his constituents and for others in Northern Ireland who have been affected by the scandal. I quite understand his point. I'm very sympathetic to it, but it was a very difficult decision we took. Clearly, we are very happy to work with the authorities, and we've, as I said in my remarks, spoken to my counterpart in Northern Ireland. We've got some legislation we've tabled today, a 10-clause, 10-page bill. It should be a relatively straightforward piece of legislation to put together in terms of the context of it. We're very happy to lend our support to Northern Ireland to be able to do the same as we're doing, if that's the choice they want to make, which I think, as he has outlined, that's the political consensus in Northern Ireland, which I would welcome.
Stephen Farr.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is a national scandal which requires a national solution. The political leaders in Northern Ireland, as has been stated, are unanimous that they want Westminster to act in this particular sphere. The Minister won't be stepping on anyone's toes constitutionally if he proceeds on that basis. The Justice Minister advises me that what's required to include Northern Ireland is relatively straightforward and it's not complicated in any shape or form. The stark reality is that given the newly restored executive that doesn't have the capacity to pass this at the same time as Westminster, so there will be an inequity across the UK on this reserved matter. So can I ask the Minister one more time to listen to the voices from Northern Ireland, and rather than simply saying that he will work with the executive, take on board what the executive is saying and actually include Northern Ireland in the bill?
Well, thank you for his points. Which I said in earlier similar interventions is that we're very sympathetic, we're very keen to lend support, not just in case of moral support, but actual, if we can help to draft the bill, for example, we're willing to do that. But of course, I'll continue to listen to what he says and others who have a similar view in terms of the devolved administrations. We're keen to make this work UK-wide, and certainly redress schemes will be available UK-wide if we can get those prosecutions quashed on a UK-wide basis.
Can I thank the Minister very much and pay tribute to his perseverance in bringing this matter to the legislative change. It is indeed fantastic to hear the legislation that has been written just to squash convictions relating to the Horizon scandal. This has been a long time coming, and those affected must be praised for their long journey to justice. However, there are so many that unfortunately have not lived to see this. So what steps will the Minister take to ensure that the legacy of those who were affected but have passed away will live on and that their families are supported through this redress payment to lessen the years of pain and that they have endured as families.
Well, can I thank him for his work on this and his regular contributions on this and many other matters, of course. Yes, I mean, this has taken too long, as he quite rightly says, and some people sadly have passed away, which is terrible for the families, and they will never live to see their names and their convictions exonerated. The redress schemes work for the estate. So if somebody has passed away, of course, the family can come forward and submit a claim, or they can choose to fix some awards and finish their claim in that way, pursue the claim that way, which is a much quicker process. That happens for families in a sad situation he outlines, but very happy to work with him to make sure we do deliver for his constituents.
Point of order. Thank you. That concludes the statement. Point of order, Paula Barker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am hoping that you can give me some advice about how I can pursue an urgent response from the Secretary of State for Education. I wrote to her on the 28th of February outlining urgent concerns about King's Leadership Secondary School not being able to open in my constituency, despite the Department for Education providing a DFE unique reference number and DFE number, both of which are required for the local authority to offer in the admissions brochure. The department went on to recently instruct the local authority to remove King's Leadership Academy from the admissions process. Parents have now been informed that King's Leadership will not open in September, and their children have been allocated secondary schools which were not one of their preferred choices, causing distress and logistical nightmares. It is completely unacceptable to not have received a response on a matter of such urgency, and unacceptable for the department to